At around 1 a.m. on December 14, 2025, hikers heard a woman calling them from a porch that vanished before they reached it. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is just outside Midlothian, Illinois, hidden behind a stretch of forest preserve most people only see from the road. During the day, it feels neglected more than haunted. Broken headstones, mud paths, old trees leaning inward like they've grown tired of holding themselves up. But once the sun goes down, the place feels different in a way that's hard to explain unless you've been there. The woods around it don't just get dark. They feel sealed off, like sound and light don't move through them the way they should. That night, there were 3 of us. We'd grown up hearing stories about Bachelor's Grove our whole lives. Everyone around Chicago has. The woman on the grave, the yellow dog near the gate, cars that won't start after midnight. Most of us treated it like folklore. Something fun to talk about but not real. We weren't there to prove anything. We just wanted to see it at night, once, so we could say we had. We parked along the Forest Preserve Road a little before 12 a.m. There were no other cars, no distant headlights, just the quiet hum of the road fading as we stepped into the trees. The air smelled like wet leaves and stagnant water. Not rotten, exactly, just old. The kind of smell that never really goes away. We followed the main path toward the cemetery fence, using only the moonlight. Our flashlights stayed in our pockets. It felt disrespectful to turn them on right away, like shining lights into someone else's house. By around 12:30 a.m., we were standing in front of the iron gate. Parts of it were bent outward, like something had pushed through at some point. Inside, the headstones looked uneven and sunken. Some tilted so badly, you wondered how long before they disappeared into the ground completely. That's when we noticed the light. It wasn't inside the cemetery. It was deeper in the woods off to the northwest. At first, I thought it was a reflection or someone else's flashlight, but it didn't move. It stayed perfectly still. A single warm glow, like a lamp in a farmhouse window. I remember feeling confused more than scared. There shouldn't have been anything back there. No houses, no buildings. The Forest Preserve maps don't show any structures anywhere near that area. One of us laughed nervously and said maybe someone lived out there off the grid. None of us really believed that, but no one challenged it either. We stepped off the trail without saying much. The ground immediately changed under our feet. The dirt turned soft and wet, and every step made a faint pulling sound as our boots lifted free. The farther we went, the quieter everything became. No wind in the trees, no insects, just the sound of our breathing and our footsteps. As we moved closer, the shape of the house became clearer. It was a white farmhouse, 2 stories, a front porch with wooden steps. Nothing dramatic or exaggerated. It looked normal, familiar, the kind of house you might pass every day and never think twice about. A light was on inside, glowing through a front window and spilling onto the porch. That's when we heard her, a woman's voice, calm and steady, coming from the direction of the porch. She didn't shout. She didn't sound frightened. She spoke the way someone does when they're trying to reassure you. "It's all right," she said. "You can come closer." The words felt close, too close, like she was standing just out of sight. We stopped walking. For a few seconds, none of us said anything. I remember feeling embarrassed, like we were about to scare ourselves over nothing. But at the same time, my chest felt tight, the way it does when your body senses something is wrong before your mind catches up. We started walking again. As we got closer, small things about the house began to feel off. The windows didn't reflect light properly. The edges of the building seemed slightly blurred, like our eyes couldn't fully focus on it. I told myself it was the darkness, or the angle, or just nerves. By the time it was around 1 a.m., we were close enough to clearly see the porch steps. That's when the house started to change. At first, it was subtle. The porch seemed lower than it had been a moment earlier. The windows looked closer together. I thought maybe we were walking downhill and misjudging the distance. Then one of us stopped and said, "Is it getting smaller?" Once he said it out loud, there was no denying it. The house wasn't moving away from us. It was shrinking in place. The porch steps shortened, compressing inward. The windows pulled closer together, like someone was slowly erasing space itself. The roof line dropped lower and lower, as if the entire structure was folding in on itself. We kept walking, but the house receded without actually moving. The woman spoke again. This time, her voice sounded closer, even though the house was smaller. "Don't stop." That's when panic finally hit. One of us blinked. Just a normal blink. No dizziness, no warning. And suddenly, the house was gone. No porch, no windows, no light. We were standing knee-deep in freezing water. I stumbled forward and nearly fell. My flashlight slipped from my hand and vanished beneath the surface. When I looked around, I realized we weren't on solid ground anymore. We were in the middle of the swamp, surrounded by tall reeds and black water. The silence was overwhelming. Not quiet, silent. No insects, no wind, no distant road noise, just our breathing and the faint rippling of water around our legs. It took a few seconds for fear to fully register. We moved fast after that, slipping, grabbing branches, pulling ourselves toward higher ground. One of us shouted when something brushed against his ankle, but when we looked, there was nothing there. When we finally reached solid ground again, we turned our flashlights on. The beams cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees, mud, and water. No foundation, no debris, no sign that a house had ever existed there. We didn't talk as we made our way back toward the trail. When the cemetery fence came back into view, I felt a wave of relief that didn't last long. Something was sitting on one of the headstones. At first, I thought it was a statue. A woman in a long dress, seated calmly, holding what looked like a small child in her arms. She didn't glow. She didn't float. She looked solid, real. Her face was turned slightly away, but I could see the outline of her hair pinned back in an old-fashioned style. The child's head rested against her shoulder, completely still. None of us raised a camera. None of us spoke. After a few seconds, she was gone. Not fading, not dissolving, just gone. We left immediately. I didn't look back until we reached the car, and even then, I regretted it. The woods looked darker than they should have, like the shadows were heavier than the night allowed. The next morning, I checked maps, property records, old photos. There has never been a farmhouse on that land. What bothers me isn't that the house disappeared. It's that it felt like it wasn't meant to stay once we got too close. I haven't been back to Bachelor's Grove since, and I don't think I ever will. Would you have followed that voice or turned back before the house erased itself? I trusted my smart lock because it kept records. That's how I know this isn't paranoia. Someone entered my apartment while I slept, and nothing shows them arriving. Life at the time followed a routine, not a comforting one, but a necessary one. Night work does that. Days stop feeling separate, and everything turns into repetition. Drive home, lock the door, eat something small, sleep, repeat. That repetition mattered because exhaustion was constant. The work schedule leading up to this was unforgiving. 3 overnight 12-hour shifts back in an emergency room in Moses Lake, Washington. Anyone who's worked nights knows what that does to perception. The body stays awake because it has to. The mind lags behind, always catching up a second too late. When fatigue reaches that level, habits become automatic. Doors are locked without thinking. Phones get plugged in without checking the screen. The environment becomes something that's trusted because there isn't enough energy left to question it. The apartment was part of that trust. The building was Aspen Pines Apartments, a newer complex marketed as smart living. No physical keys, an app-controlled deadbolt. Every entry log, maintenance access tracked automatically. Hallway cameras on every floor, installed after a break in the previous year. Management talked about the system constantly. The point wasn't convenience. The point was proof. Every movement was supposed to leave a record. That morning, the door was locked the same way it always was. The app confirmed it. The icon turned green. The activity log refreshed. No alerts, no warnings. The apartment settled into silence. Sleep came fast. There were no sounds during the night. No footsteps. No voices. No doors opening or closing. The apartment stayed still until morning. The notification didn't arrive with urgency. It didn't buzz loudly. It didn't demand attention. It sat quietly on the phone screen, waiting to be noticed. Maintenance key accessed. At first glance, it looked harmless. A delayed system alert, a background update. Something routine that didn't require concern. But the timestamp didn't match anything familiar. Same night, same apartment. Early morning hours, when the building is usually silent. The activity log showed the front door unlocking, remaining unlocked, then relocking. 6 minutes. At first, the apartment looked unchanged. The door was locked. The chain hadn't been touched. The windows were closed. There were no scratches on the frame. No damage. No sign of forced entry. But the details didn't match what had been left behind. A kitchen chair pulled out slightly. A folded dish towel disturbed. Keys missing from the hook by the door. Nothing overturned. Nothing rushed. The kind of changes made by someone who didn't need to hurry. The hallway footage was checked next. That was supposed to be the simplest part. Anyone approaching the apartment would have been recorded. The cameras overlapped. There were no blind spots. The footage was rewound to the early morning hours. The hallway was empty. No footsteps crossing the frame. No shadows stretching across the floor. No elevator doors opening. No apartment doors opening or closing anywhere in view. At the exact moment the log showed the door unlocking, the hallway footage remained unchanged. The camera showed the same empty corridor, frame after frame. The system hadn't failed. It had recorded something that didn't need to be seen. Property management was contacted as soon as the office opened. The response was dismissive at first. The assumption was user error, a misunderstanding of how the system worked. The maintenance schedule was checked. No work orders, no emergency calls, no inspections. When asked to confirm whether the maintenance key had been used, there was a pause on the line. Then the answer came. It does show an entry. Later that day, the access report was printed. It showed the maintenance credential had authenticated correctly. Not a forced override, not a glitch flag, not a manual error. The explanation offered was that the system sometimes duplicated events. That explanation didn't account for moved furniture. A police report was filed for documentation. The first officer checked the locks and the windows. Everything was intact, no damage, no sign of forced entry, no evidence of a break-in. The suggestion was exhaustion, stress, long shifts. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every sound stood out. The refrigerator cycling on, the heater clicking, a car passing outside. The app was checked repeatedly. No new entries appeared. The following day, a small indoor camera was installed facing the kitchen and front door. It wasn't suggested by management. It wasn't part of the building system. It was something personal. A thin strip of clear tape was placed along the freezer seal. It was an old habit from traveling. Simple. If the tape broke, the freezer had been opened. The door was locked again. The app confirmed it. The activity log refreshed. Everything looked normal. Sleep came slowly. The phone vibrated shortly after 2 a.m. This time, the notification was seen immediately. Maintenance key accessed. The app showed the door unlocking. The indoor camera feed froze briefly, just long enough to notice, then resumed. The door stayed closed. No one entered the frame. No shadow crossed the floor. No movement registered. The apartment remained silent. 6 minutes passed. The app showed the door relocking. Nothing else changed. Several minutes passed before leaving the bedroom. Movement felt measured now, deliberate. The apartment looked exactly the same at first. Then the freezer was checked. The tape had been torn. The freezer door was opened slowly. Inside, on the top shelf, was a solid block of ice. The keys were frozen inside it, not dropped into loose ice, not partially frozen, sealed, positioned flat like someone had taken the time to place them properly before closing the door. The ice was thick enough that it would have taken several minutes to freeze that solid, time that had been spent inside the apartment. Police were called again. This time, the response was different. Photos were taken. The app logs were documented. The freezer was photographed. Questions were asked about carbon monoxide, about sleepwalking, about stress. Before leaving, the officer said something quietly, without making eye contact. There had been other complaints. Same building, same system. That was the part that didn't fade. Property management replaced the lock the next day. Software updates were applied. Codes were changed. Reassurances were given. None of it addressed what had happened twice. The apartment no longer felt empty when it was supposed to be. 2 weeks later, the unit was vacated. The keys are still kept in sight, not because of fear, because someone once proved they could take them. Would you trust smart locks after knowing someone entered without ever appearing on camera? The lights didn't turn on by accident. They flashed a pattern instead. That's how it became clear someone else was in control. Life before this followed a quiet routine. Not exciting, not chaotic. Predictable in a way that made it easy to ignore small details. Work from home, late nights, long stretches of silence broken only by the hum of electronics and the occasional car passing outside. That routine existed because it had to. At the time, the work schedule leaned heavily into nights. Software engineering projects that ran on deadlines instead of daylight. Code written while the rest of the neighborhood slept. The kind of hours where time stops feeling real and the line between night and morning disappears completely. That environment made the house feel sealed off from the rest of the world. This happened in Milford, Delaware, in a residential district where nothing ever really happened. No break-ins, no sirens, no reason to feel watched. The house itself wasn't old or unusual. Single story, quiet street. Neighbors close enough to see their porch lights, but far enough away that no one paid attention to each other. The house relied heavily on smart systems. Smart locks, smart thermostat, smart lights. Everything was tied to a central hub, controlled through apps, updated automatically, advertised as secure, advertised as efficient. The idea was convenience. But convenience only works when control stays local. That night started the same way every other late night did. Work wrapped up sometime after midnight. Screens dimmed. Devices left on standby. Lights turned off through the app without standing up. Sleep came slowly, but it came. The first thing that broke the routine wasn't sound. It was light. A sudden flash through closed eyelids. Then darkness again. Then another flash, bright enough to register even while half asleep. At first, it felt like a dream. The kind where your brain tries to explain something impossible by turning it into nonsense. But the flashes kept coming, spaced evenly, deliberate, not random. The bedroom lights were turning on and off, not all at once, not flickering, flashing. There was no immediate movement, no sitting up, just lying still, trying to decide whether it was a system glitch or something external. Smart bulbs fail sometimes. Firmware updates roll out at strange hours. It happens. Then the pattern repeated. 3 short flashes, 3 long flashes, 3 short flashes. It stopped. The room went dark again. That was the moment sleep ended completely. The lights weren't malfunctioning. They were communicating. The phone was checked immediately. No alerts, no app notifications, no system errors. The smart hub showed all devices online and functioning normally. The lights flashed again. Same pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. That realization didn't bring panic. It brought confusion. Because nothing in the system should have been able to do that. Smart bulbs don't send messages. They don't decide patterns. They respond to commands. The app history was opened. No commands were listed. No manual inputs. No automation triggers. No scheduled routines. The lights were being controlled from somewhere else. The house stayed quiet. No footsteps. No voices. No doors opening. Just the soft click of the bulbs turning on and off, patiently repeating the same signal. The power breaker was considered, but dismissed. Cutting power wouldn't explain the behavior. It would just remove visibility. The light stopped suddenly. The silence that followed felt heavier than the flashing. The house stayed dark. Several minutes passed. Nothing else happened. Sleep didn't return. Morning came slowly. Daylight made everything look normal again. The lights behaved as expected. No flickering, no flashing, no patterns. Work was put off. The focus shifted to the systems. The smart hub logs were checked first. They showed nothing unusual. No remote access. No unauthorized connections. All devices reported normal operation. That should have ended it, but the pattern wouldn't leave. The smoke detector was checked next, not because there was any reason to. Just because it was the only device that hadn't been interacted with directly in months. It sat on the ceiling above the bed, its small indicator light barely noticeable. Up close, something felt off. The casing wasn't flush. One edge sat slightly lower than the rest, not enough to notice casually, enough to notice when looking for something wrong. The detector was removed carefully. Inside, behind the sensor housing, was a small black lens, an IP camera. It wasn't loose. It wasn't hidden sloppily. It had been installed. A thin wire ran from the camera into the ceiling, disappearing into the crawl space above. The camera felt warm to the touch. Powered, active. The router logs were checked next. An unfamiliar IP address appeared in the device list, not labeled, not recognized. It had been connected for weeks. Data transfer logs showed consistent outbound traffic during overnight hours. Streaming. The camera feed was accessed through the IP directly. What loaded on the screen wasn't the ceiling. It was the bed. The angle was perfect, wide enough to see the entire mattress, close enough to capture movement. The timestamp confirmed it had been lived the night before. Scrolling back revealed more. Hours of footage. Night after night. Then something else appeared. A chat overlay. The feed wasn't private. It was being streamed to a dark web forum. The page title didn't matter. The usernames didn't matter. What mattered was the timestamp. For 3 hours during the night the lights flashed, the feed showed movement. Not on the bed. Beside it, someone had been standing there, not pacing, not moving much, just standing, occasionally leaning closer, occasionally stepping back, always staying within the frame. The comments scrolled alongside the video. Short messages. Reactions. Timestamps. The person in the room wasn't hiding, they were performing. The realization didn't feel immediate. It settled slowly, piece by piece. The lights weren't a warning. They were a signal, not to the person sleeping, to the people watching. Police were called immediately. The response was quiet but urgent. The camera was photographed, the router logs copied, the feed URL documented. Cybercrime units were contacted. The house was cleared. No one else was found inside. The crawl space wiring suggested the camera had been installed weeks earlier. There were no signs of forced entry. Locks were intact, windows unbroken, no alarms triggered. The intruder hadn't rushed. They had planned. The most disturbing detail came later, after reviewing the footage with an investigator. The person standing beside the bed never once looked at the camera. They looked at the sleeper. Every time. The lights had been the only mistake. Everything else had gone unnoticed. The house was vacated the same day. None of the devices came along. The lights were left behind. Smart systems were removed entirely from the next place. Even now, darkness doesn't feel empty. It feels observed. Would you sleep peacefully knowing someone watched for hours before deciding to leave?